Hello and welcome to another episode of Grief in the Raw. My name is Kelli Holloway and I am your host. I am full when I say that I am ready and excited for this next guest and for you all to meet a dear friend of mine and also UNC alum, Trey Washington. Hi, Trey.
What a nice introduction. Yes, it's an honor and a privilege, genuinely, to be in conversation with you around this. As you know, I love to talk about grief. I didn't even get a chance to prepare anything. You know, oftentimes I see this question floating online, like, what is the one topic that you can talk about for an hour without doing any preparation? It's like, listen, if I can't talk about grief for an hour,
right.
So I'm gonna put it to the test today. We'll see. Yeah. But yes, thank you for having me on. Genuinely,
you're in good company, y'all. Let me tell you a little bit more about Trey before we jump into the grief scale. Before we jump to the questions, so it's my pleasure to introduce y'all to Trey, whose pronouns are they, them, he, him. Trey occupies the intersection of fried fish, porch sitting, Fantasia's runs, leftism, and doing the chicken head to every song like it's still 2001. Trey, we're going to need to see a bit of...
Listen, I almost did it.
We're going there.
Look, them shoulders started to jump.
Listen. Look, I'll come in with it too, you know? Anywho, Trey is as black and as Southern as the day is long. So you all know that our conversation is going to be smooth like gravy and biscuits. He creates video content and writes about justice-oriented topics primarily. These resources work to inform, inspire, and cultivate action, y'all. When he's not nose deep in a book, you can find Trey screaming on the internet all the things like grief, friendship, and radical community building. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Trey, for occupying this space with me.
Kelli, thank you. Genuinely, thank you.
Yeah. So on the show, for those that have been listening or following along, you know that we always start with a grief scale. I want to know how you all as listeners are checking in with yourselves and your body. I know that Trey is really good about checking in with himself, and we'll talk more about that and his tips for you all. But to begin with, I want to know from you, Trey, where are you on the grief scale? Whereas 1 is, I'm not really feeling grief in my body today. I'm as light as a feather. 10 is super heavy, can barely lift a hand because I'm super heavy with it. So where are you feeling today on your grief scale?
Yeah, I think this is evidence of the kind of cyclical nature of grief. If you had asked me this question like 2 days ago, I would have probably been pushing 8, 9. I mean, I was feeling like especially grief-stricken this week just because of a lot of things that are going on in the world broadly. Work, I've been experiencing a lot of grief there, but I was able to kind of metabolize a little bit more of that yesterday. And so I'm feeling pretty good today, actually. I'll probably say I'm tipping around 4 or 5. Yeah, I was able to kind of get out in nature a little bit, release some of that, and so yeah, I'm feeling okay.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I'm even with you, so we're aligned. I'm about a 4 today. I'm feeling lighter. Last week was heavier because I was in North Carolina and kind of just all around the things that remind me of my mother, that reminded me of life before. These days, I am categorizing my life experience between life before and life after, down to the fact that I can look at a picture of myself and say, oh, that girl doesn't know grief yet. Like that smile, I can tell mom hasn't passed, even if I don't know the date of the picture. So being able to categorize in that way, but then also sitting with myself and letting myself feel, because I was able to do that last week, I feel lighter with it, still feeling it, functional at a 4, but that's where I stand today too. So I'm glad to know we're aligned, and I'm hoping that this is also helping others who are listening or watching set their intentions behind, well, what are you feeling today? How is the conversation centered around grief affecting you in your day today? Are you at a 10? Are you at a 1? Somewhere in between, of course. It all is valid, and we say that not because we're trying to compare our stories or our journeys to yours, but just letting you know that when you sit in recognition of where you feel and how you feel, you take stock of that, it's going to help you get to where you want to be in your own
Hmm.
individual journey. So thank you, Trey, for that. So, jumping into questions, because there's so much that we could discuss between each other. I've been following your story. You have always done very well at being a storyteller and being able to help others feel what you're going through. I don't know if you know that about yourself, that you're an empath, but you absolutely are.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a goal of mine to be a good storyteller. I grew up around a lot of good storytellers, people who I want to emulate and people who I want to be like. My grandmother is one of those people, and so yeah, storytelling has always been a part of my life, and it's always been something that's very important. So I appreciate that. I really,
Good.
yeah,
Good.
thank you.
So, when you think about your grandmother's role in your life, how do you believe her passing has affected the dynamics within your family?
Oh, wow. So I was really fortunate to have grown up like right next door to my grandmother. I know a
Good.
lot of people speak about like only seeing their grandparents maybe a couple times a year or having to travel really far distances. And yeah, I was really fortunate to grow up like literally right next door. My grandmother moved down to North Carolina from Connecticut, and my mother moved down shortly after her and literally built a little single wide trailer right next door on the same land. And so I feel like my grandmother and my grandparents, generally speaking, had like this ever present quality. Like they were just always there. My parents got divorced early on, but my grandparents like backfilled that role. And so like we never wanted for anything. They were just
Mm,
always there, always providing, always doing, that sort of thing.
that's
And so
dope.
yeah, I feel like my grandmother in particular has what are people saying nowadays? Like a main character energy. She
Yeah.
just actually took up so much space also. And so yeah, they were they were I call them rock stars. Like my grandparents hosted a lot of things. They had a basement bar with lights and like a DJ set. And I'm like, wait a minute, who are these people?
Rock
Yeah, like a
stars.
pool table down there and everything. It was like really, really cool. And like they hosted Thanksgiving and Christmas. My grandmother's birthday was in July, like right when the summer is getting good. And so she always had this like backyard cookout for her birthday. And it's big. I'm talking tents and everything. Like we're gonna do it really big for my birthday. And so yeah, I felt like my grandparents occupied a lot of space in my life. And I know some people talk about people being anchors. Like there's always individuals or multiple individuals who function as like anchors in a community or glue in a community or in a family. And I would say that my grandmother was that glue, always in the know about what's going on with everyone else in the family. Things flowed through her. And yeah, so I'd say in her passing, one of the big things that I've noticed or experienced or felt intimately is just like there being like some instability. Like we don't have that glue now. Like we don't have the place that it is just known that we are all going to come back to. We're kind of figuring that out now. I didn't just lose my grandmother, the person, but I lost like someone who fills this major role in our community and in our family. I lost a place also. Like we haven't. My grandmother passed a year ago, June. Only recently did we all come back to her house for the first time. Like some of us have been there individually, but like that's unheard of for a year to pass and us not gather at my grandmother's home is
Wow.
is new in a way that like I just can't even really put into words. Like it, yeah. So I would say yeah, I lost a person, a role, and a place when my grandmother transitioned, and all of that has been uh, difficult to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, number one, I'm so sorry for your loss that you continue to navigate. A lot of people say, oh, well, 6 months pass, 9 months pass, a year pass. It's all hard. No matter
Mm-hmm.
how long it has been. And certainly being able to identify with you when you talk about the places and the everything that your grandmother represented. And that's why another reason why I wanted to discuss with you just about that matriarch, the pinnacle. Like you, when you said everything flowed through your grandmother, I identify with that from my grandma, because it was like,
Yeah.
if grandma don't know about it, it's not true. It's not
Right.
right. Didn't actually happen. If she hasn't like heard it, adopted it, and then given her opinion, and we all in formation with how she felt and thought and everything, like that's a fabric of our being. And so to go
Uh-huh.
from having that one day to then the silence of not having that, I understand, and I know that it will resonate so much with our community in terms of, well, where does that go? You know, does it just fade away and fall off, or is there a new energy? So that's what I feel as though we're all after, is it can't be replicated, but
Hmm.
what can we put in place to help alleviate that pain? So I'm proud of the work that you're doing out loud to show that there is more, and while we shoulder that load, there is more on the other side of that. And if you don't mind sharing, what's your grandmother's name?
My grandmother's name is Elizabeth Ray Washington, but we call her Ray Bone. our
Oh,
family, our family's nickname, so to speak, is Bone. Her mother is the first person to be called that, and so everybody is like, "I'm Trey Bone." My mother's Sheila Bone, but my grandmother is Ray Bone. And if you met her, it would like make so much sense.
oh
It would make
God.
so much sense.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, in speaking of her passing and the dynamics and the shift that has occurred in your own family, you think about personal loss, right? But then there's more than that, right? Even thinking about our journeys on the past 4 years, let's call it at the onset of COVID, even though it's
Hmm.
before COVID, right? There's not just COVID, it's genocide, it's political unrest, it's racism, it's personal loss, life changes. The list goes on and on and on, and it's stacking. It can be exhausting, and you've done such a well job of showing what to do in the midst of that exhaustion to still make sure that you are well and the things that you're doing in life still matter, even though you're sometimes underneath all that grief and pain. So
Hmm.
have there been, or with these events, how have they shaped your perspective on grief, life, and community?
Okay, so this question I glanced at and I was like, I could write a dissertation.
I
I
know.
could write a
I
dissertation on
know.
this
That's
on
why I
just
asked it.
this by itself. I could take this question so many different ways, and I'm gonna go wherever the spirit takes me, and you just
Mm-hmm.
let me know because if I get the yapping, it just happens. Um, I think I'm gonna try to anchor this in a story, I guess, to kind of illustrate what has happened to me over the past 4 years. When my grandmother, so my granddad died months before COVID happened, just months before it happened, and then COVID hit, and then about a year or so into COVID, my grandmother received a stage 4 diagnosis of cancer, and before I could even catch my breath for my grandfather passing, so I have all these things that are happening, like just one after another, and they completely just turn my world on its axis. Like I was reeling. I literally, the night that I had gotten the call that my grandmother had passed, I had been asleep for a couple hours, and when she got the diagnosis, it was really really bad. We didn't know how long she was going to be with us, but we know we were just on borrowed time, and she had actually managed to fight that thing for a year. But when I got the call that night, I instantly knew before I didn't answer it because I knew what it was, and I had told myself that I wanted to hang on to my grandmother for one more night. Like to answer that call would have been to acknowledge the fact that she is no longer here with us. And the other thing that I was considering was like I don't have enough PTO to take time off to grieve. That was literally my next thought. So like think about that in the context
Listen,
of like what grief asks of us and then the things we have to consider because we have to just continue living as human beings in this
right.
world under capitalism, etc., right? And so
So true.
the other thing I'm considering is like I lost my grandmother, but I don't have enough time to take off. And so like to acknowledge that I have to instantly start doing math in my head. Versus grieving, I have to do math in my head to say, okay, now I got to send these emails and I got to take so many days off, et cetera, that sort of thing. And so that was a bit of a wake up call. And then if I go backwards to like COVID and like I work in healthcare, when we went on national lockdown, I was on the highway like by myself going to work. considered an essential worker, and it's just like startling to be on the highway by yourself. I worked in skilled nursing at the time, and patients were getting sick, but we couldn't have visitors in. So I'm watching visitors, try to engage with their family members through the window, and like patients are passing away, and their family can't be there with them. Um, so these are the things that I'm experiencing before my grandmother even passed. So like grief is like just it's knocking on my door. It's knocking on my door, and then my grandmother passed and it's banging on my door. And I told myself like I don't have a framework to hold my grief. I've never I've not lost people before, but like I just lost my granddad and I lost my grandmother, and I was like I don't have the skills, the tools to navigate this at all. And so I've been in therapy for quite some time. I was talking to my therapist. I picked up a book though by Francis Wheeler called The Wild Edges of Sorrow. It's like I need to read this thing. I think I sat down and read that thing in a night. Because I just needed a framework. I needed some tools, something to guide me, because otherwise I felt like I was gonna spin out. I didn't have any. Yeah, I was
And
gonna lose it.
can I
Yes.
say I I'm not an avid reader, but I purchased that book because of one of your posts. Like one of your posts about that book, I purchased the book. I have it, have not read it, but this is a good reminder to me to revisit the commitment I said, because when you explained it in such an eloquent way of that book, kind of helping you to shoulder that load and giving you somewhere to put your grief, I was like, I need it. So I took to Amazon. I ordered it.
Yeah.
It's on the shelf somewhere. I'm gonna take it
Gentle
down.
nudge, gentle
I'm gonna
nudge.
take it down.
I tell everybody about that book. I feel like we and maybe we'll get into this a little later, but we often
Yeah.
conceptualize grief as like a response to like a single acute event. You know what I mean? Like I lose something or I lose someone, and then I have this grief experience. And that book taught me that like grief is something that grief literally picks you up and puts you on a different shore. It is a like a position from which we enter into the world now. It's not like I am always grieving. I will always be grieving, that sort of thing. And I feel like that book just really gave me like some stuff to chew on. And yes, I tell anybody who will listen, like get that book and don't wait till you're grieving. Like get it now, because grief, like it like adds color to the world. Like yes, we lose, but there's a whole different way that I experience my emotions. I experience the world because I now have a framework and a relationship with grief that I didn't have before. I just simply didn't have. I wasn't equipped to navigate any of that stuff. But anywho, jumping back into okay, so like I lose my grandmother, and I'm like faced with capitalism right away. And what I become I was like start to realize in this moment is that like I feel like the world intentionally robs us of the things that we need to grieve. And by that I mean like time. We need time. We need connection to other people, a connection to nature, uh, the ability to engage in like rituals, whatever that might be, prayer, journal, just literally going and putting your feet in the grass. Like work and the way that this world is structured robs us of the opportunity to do all of those things. And so I'm like coming to terms with that, and I'm like already because of COVID, I have this perception like student loans stopped and they paused rent, and like the world can exist in a different way, and
Mm-hmm.
they literally just turn a switch on and everything stopped for a minute to buy us some more time. So I'm like, all of this is fake. I need to structure my life to the extent that I can to be able to engage in the things that I now know I need. All those things that I just mentioned, my life will look different from now, unless I will not be able to function. So I really started to like develop like, how can I get in nature more? How can I really like just talk to people about grief? So I do it online. I talk to my family and my friends about grief because this is a communal thing. How can I like develop some rituals to like move grief through my body, that sort of thing, to process it and to move with it. Yeah, I need to be able to like, yeah, move from through the world from a position of grief now. Like it changed everything for me. It changed everything for me. Yeah, the way that I structure my life, where I spend my time, what I do. Grief was the catalyst for a lot of that. Yeah.
So much wisdom. Where do you get your wisdom? Like, I know that's a maybe a weird question because you are you, right? But how do you, organize it in a way, because I've seen the, I think we've all seen the other sides of grief, where it takes you down and you don't come back up from it, where you feel as though you're robbed in that moment of any intellectual thought, or you're feeling like you feel as though you don't even have a place in it. But you tend to, from the outside looking in, have such a great perspective shift in the way that you explain it and the way that you own it. Where does that come from?
Hmm. I think it comes. I was actually just thinking about this weekend, not necessarily about my own personal wisdom, but like what I was feeling very grief stricken over this past week, and I wasn't really leaning on a lot of my practices, and I like stopped for a minute. I was like, okay, what's missing? I read every morning before I start my day, just for a little bit, and I feel like I want to do something for myself first before I jump into the rat race of like what I got to do for the day. Right? I just want to do
Yeah.
something that feels like really good for myself. And so a lot of uh, my the way that I think about different things and try to explain different things just comes from what I read. I firmly believe that like it's individualism that tells us that we all can't be good orators or storytellers. That's individualism speaking. It just takes
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
practice. We read, you practice, you do the thing, and then you become proficient at it. Every single one of us can do those things. And so
Right.
I just try not to shy away from it. I get a little nervous. I just jump in and just do the thing and
Yeah.
until it just gets better. But I feel like a lot of like just black women, like black queer writers have like modeled that for me. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just trying to do what they do. I'm following a lineage of people that came before me in a variety of different ways. And I take bits and pieces from them, and I take my own personal experiences, and I try to like craft my own story because I feel like we are fit within this like broader story that's happening, and that's what I try to do is just tell that story in a way that allows other people to see themselves in it. What
Right.
do you have to offer in this story? What is your part of this story? That's all. Yeah.
Right. And giving people the permission to have a place in a story.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we're weighted down by our own, like we talk ourselves out of it. And it's like, no, your voice matters. Your voice in all of this is essential to how you view the world, how other people view each other. So I love that you are living that out loud, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So okay, for those of you all that don't know, Trey is somewhat of a poet. I don't know if he knows that he is or not, but I want to read something that he shared recently on IG, and then I want him to talk more about it, right? So on IG, he wrote, "Grief returned to my body. It empowered me to feel deeply and to respond to my body's needs. A work that, in the words of Francis Weller, is deeply private but best done in community. Now I am more attuned to the whispers of my body before they become roars, violent, and begging to be acknowledged." When I read, baby, when I read that, I was like, yes, yes, I need more. I need more. The way that you explained it is beyond. So I want to know, how did you sharpen your ability to recognize pain before it gets overwhelming? That's the first part of the question. Second part, because when you said it's deeply private, but it's best done in community, I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here with the
Hmm.
podcast.
Hmm.
So I want to know, how can communities better support one another in times of grief? So two loaded questions, but they both have to deal with what you put out there into the world.
Mm. First of all, thank you for the poet compliment. I appreciate
You're welcome.
That's another practice that I'm just kind of fumbling through. But yes, thank you. Oh goodness.
Mhm.
So grief returned me to my body. Uh, I feel like like again, just kind of reiterating what I said before. Like I feel like this world leaves us disembodied. Like it separates us from the things that we need because you can't. Okay, I'm thinking about this in the context of everything that's going on in the world now.
Mhm.
I will hop on IG. I'll see a video of like someone's home just being bombed, and I am expected to then turn and pivot and go to work with a smile on my face and that sort of thing. That disconnect there is so loud to me now That is the world asking me to be disconnected from my body, to like bear witness to this thing and
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalize it and then turn and like go through the daily, that just doesn't really sit well with me at all. And so when I
Yeah.
say grief returned me to my body, it's like, okay, I realize that I can't keep doing that, lest I will not be able to like manage. I can't continue to do that. So grief made me stop and go, okay, whatever you're bearing witness to, like grief will ask, like grief demands a witness. You need to kind of sit and be a good host to it. You can't just kind of skirt past it. Like it will catch up with you eventually, and it catches up with us in the way of like heart attacks and like that sort of thing. Like some people can't come out of there. Like I heard the grief described as like descending to the land of the ashes and that sort of thing. Like some people can't come out of that because we just don't have the tools like to cope and move with our grief. And so I think for me, I once read this quote by Prentice Hemphill that said that everything we experience in our bodies. Everything. The good, the bad, the ugly, that sort of thing. Grief is no different. And so for me, I think that I have been trying to learn how to be more attuned to what my body is telling me. I'm getting out of my head and into my body. We all experience shifts, so to speak, as we go throughout our day. Our chest gets tight, our shoulders start creeping up towards our ears, palms get a little sweaty, and sometimes we just kind of override it. We don't think much of it, but our body is like screaming to be acknowledged, to be like to bear witness to what it's telling us something. Sit with that and be a good host to what it is that your body is telling you. And I feel like that is a practice that we just like a somatic practice that we have to like learn. We aren't taught those things. This isn't something that we just intuitively know how to do because of capitalism. We don't have the time to do it. We have to kind of
Right.
keep compartmentalizing it. So yes, that's been a practice of mine since my grandmother passed. Is like just taking some time to breathe and then listen to what my body is telling me and then do something about it. Sometimes that doing something is literally just walking outside barefoot and like sinking my feet into the ground. Like taking a deep breath and exhaling the heaviness that I'm holding and knowing that the earth can hold that. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
keep it, the earth can hold it. When we went to my grandmother's house to like start the process of moving some of the things out of her house, that was such a big deal for my family members.
Yes.
I live close by, so I'm 2 hours away. So I've had the opportunity with me and my mom to like go and take a couple of visits and kind of like look through the house, that sort of thing. But like my older brother, my older sister, they're 6 hours away. And so they haven't had something for my brother. It was his first time there since he had passed. And I am watching my brother walk through the house and I'm just watching the grief. Like literally I'm seeing it on his body. And like he is my brother is like he is literally like for lack of a better, he's like Santa Claus. He is jovial. He is always joking. He is like this boisterous. He like fills the room with like joy. And I'm watching him walk through the house, and I'm watching him like sink into himself. I'm watching him like be quick with us, and I've never experienced this before. But I'm like, yes, your body is telling you to bear witness to something. But
Mm-hmm.
until we like learn these things, it's hard to even recognize that, much less do something about it. And so yeah, I hope that answers your first
Yeah.
question.
Yes,
And
yes.
and then the second thing that you had asked, oh my goodness, I think I lost it.
No, how can communities get better about supporting one another in times of
Oh
grief?
yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing, I think we often think of grief, as Francis Weller mentioned, as like this individual experience. Like we all come together for like the funeral, whatever the case may be, but then we go our separate ways and we hold that by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there is a part of grief that is like very, very personal. However, grief is not something that is to be held alone by one person. Even like I mentioned earlier, like I think of it as like co-regulating with other people, with nature, sometimes even with our pets, like
Yeah.
other people, other beings, that like the earth helps us like move through our grief. That is not something that is meant to be carried by yourself. We all have different capacities and that sort of thing, and it fluctuates wildly. And people can help you fill in the gap and hold you to the sun when you need it, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Um, I think of it as like a the way that I heard it described as like disaggregating our needs, like one person isn't meant to do all the things for you. Like the more you
Mm-hmm.
have your community chip in, we all just hold each other up in the midst of our grief. Yeah, it's just something that's just not meant to be done alone. And so for me, I've been like getting into the habit of just asking people like when I feel like it's right. I'm like at the function, just like, hey, how you going?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when I feel like in the proper context, like
yeah.
asking friends about their grief practices, generally like asking them about what they're holding. Like sometimes,
Mm,
we ask people how they're doing and we kind of skirt past it, but no, like what are you actually holding, and like stopping and holding space for that. Because sometimes even that, like having just giving people the opportunity to like voice what it is that they're going through is like something that people just don't get to do. And that can like open up a lot for people. And then when you get into like, okay, but like, okay, what are you doing to like metabolize that? And so I was taught that like grief just continues to cycle through our body. If we don't do something to move it through our body and release it, it just keeps cycling back through us. And so I often will get into, okay, now what are we doing to like move this grief? Do you have any practices? Well, here's what I do. What do you think about that? Can we co-create something together? It's just having those conversations that we just often don't get an opportunity to have. And I find that I'm not often teaching people. I'm literally learning what it is that other people are doing and maybe what they consider, or maybe a little, scared to try. Well, let's try it
mm-hmm.
together. Let's fumble through this thing together until we develop something that works for us or works for you. I think it's just coming to that conversation with humility and vulnerability, and just seeing what comes of it. Because we just don't get a chance to talk about grief with other people except when we're at a funeral or a couple days afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
I love that. And when you say co-regulating, my first thought, because I've got two toddlers. Well, they're not really 4 and 6, soon to be 7. So can I call them toddlers still? I don't know. Young ladies. But when they have big emotions, I try to co-regulate with them instead of saying,
Hmm.
and I think the it's this gentle parenting and all of that, but before, it's okay, you're tantruming, let's put you in a room, it's a timeout, right? And Mike and I have been intentional about, we're not putting them in timeout, we're not going to do that, because it doesn't seem right to have someone screaming at the top of their lungs and say, okay, you handle that on your own, right? So it's
Hmm.
always been this co-regulation of, let me hold your hand, get it out, scream, whatever you want to do. You want mommy to get on the floor and scream with you? Let's do it. So we're like, sit on the floor screaming together, or I'm
Hmm.
holding them and they're crying, but it's always this togetherness, and that doesn't stop the tantrum, and that's not the goal. The goal is to come out of that better, to truly feel it, so that the next time it happens, maybe it's a hurdle, but it's not this avalanche that can't be handled. And so when you talk about co-regulating someone through their grief journey, that makes perfect sense, because what good am I if I'm just crying, and I'm not going to say sulking, but if I'm crying and I'm going inward with it and I'm not letting it out, and I don't have anybody to hold my hand or to listen to me or a book to read or someone else to help shoulder it, I'm doing it all by myself. That's so much harder. So being able to realize that it is about community, and you need someone to hold your hand, sit with it, and do this co-regulation of your emotions and your feelings. We make space for that for our toddlers. We need to be able to make space for that as adults. So
You
I
speaking,
appreciate
but
it.
yeah, you speaking because what is it that you do when you co-regulate? You are validating someone's experience. Your toddlers begin to throw attention and that sort of thing, and you validate that. Then they go, okay, it's okay to tap into this thing, this big thing that I'm feeling. When my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother passed, I experienced the entire spectrum of emotions. I was mad as hell. I was sad. I was frustrated. I was like exhausted. I experienced everything, and
Mm-hmm.
having other people there to go, you know what? That's valid.
Yeah.
Help me exhale. Help me exhale. Because otherwise, when people don't validate what it is that you are feeling, what you end up doing is you shrink and you run from it in shame, and then you never
Mm-hmm.
get to like process it. You never get to process any of that stuff. Like
And you're
that is really
isolated,
important.
like on an island by yourself. You're
Yeah,
like,
by
am
yourself.
I crazy? Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really, really wonderful that y'all are doing that with the babies. And I feel like that, yeah, that's something that we do when we are working on grief with other people. We are validating the things that they are feeling and experiencing, which you just often you can't. It's hard to get that by yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to share the social media video or call out where we kind of on the show, there's an intersection between social media and life. And like you're saying, how can we just keep on scrolling on social media when life is happening? Sometimes I
Hmm.
see something on social that's a call out to grief, few and far between. But when I see that, I'm like, oh, I want to hang my hat there for a minute because I want others to realize that while it might not be on your feed, somebody's hearing it, somebody's downloading it. It's something that
Hmm.
deserves to be out there in the world. So the one that I'd like to play, and then we'll discuss it. And if you're listening, make sure you watch on on YouTube the show so that you can actually see what it is that we are discussing and talking about. Hold on one second.
When you let them go, you don't just lose them. You also lose the plans you had, the hopes you had for the future, the expectations you built together. Really, you lose a part of yourself. There's a big part of you that changes. The you that existed when you were with them, that person can never fully come back, at least not in the same way. It's like an identity crisis. And that's why it's so sad. It's not just about missing them, but it's also about mourning the part of yourself that you lost along the way.
Trey, when you hear that kind of a remark, what resonates for you, and how is it connected to your experience?
Mm. Um, I think that this just reminds me of what I've been feeling um, in regards to. Let me see if I can back up a bit. Okay, so my grandmother was really into pop culture, and she would surprise me with some of the things that she knew. Like she would hit me up sometimes and be like, "Trey, you heard the new Beyonce album?" And I'm like, "Yo, how did you know about that? It dropped at midnight. How did you know about it? I was in the bed asleep.
What were you
How
doing
did you know about
up?
it?" And I'm just like, it used to be just so funny to me how tapped in she was to popular culture. She'd be like, "Yeah, I heard it on Wendy Williams, and she heard it. I saw it on Entertainment Tonight, or something." She said she just knew the things. And so what I find myself doing nowadays is like something will happen or I'll see something and I'll reach for my phone to go, "Oh, my grandmother's gonna love this," and I forget that she's gone. My grandmother's gonna get a kick out of this when she hears this, and I forget that she's gone. And I think when I hear this message, I think about how like there are just like routines and habits that we have that like go when the person that we lose is gone, and that they permeate our lives in so many ways that you like really don't even realize it until you do it, until you reach for your phone to call like where we eating at for the holidays, and you realize that like that ain't the place no more. Like we have to like, how do you then develop new habits and strategies to backfill? You can't get it back. We have to like backfill those things and develop like new things. And I think that um that like lands on me as opportunity to often like build and co-create something new, something that feels nourishing to myself and to my family. There is amidst like I like to create things. I get a lot of joy from like building things, and so I don't often see it as a yes, it is a great loss. I've missed talking to my grandma about what's going on in the world, but there is also like a lot of opportunity there to then create new routines and that sort of thing, and that's kind of what I take from that when I hear it.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Everything that you said, I I feel so sorry for those, and sorry is a poor choice of words. I empathize with those that feel as though they can't come from under it, that grief is so strong that they sit in that sad and they don't reach for the joy. I think that's why we have these discussions to say, yes, it's okay to sit in the sad, but also reach for the joy. That's what our person would want. That's who we're missing. That's what they would want. But also that's what grief requires of us, is to
Mm-hmm.
reach for that joy and to continue on and to find a new thing or a new way. I remember when my mom first passed, there was a mentor that text me, and you get the myriad of texts. I'm so sorry for your loss, let me know what I can do. I remember the ones that were just a scotch different. And so her message to me was, I know you love sending your mom pictures of the babies, so for the next however long, when you would want to send something to her, send it to me. I probably won't
Oh.
have something cool to say like she did, but I want to sit in the gap for you. And so probably for like 6 months to a year, and still I sent her messages of, Zoe lost a tooth, here's, just randomly, and she would answer back. But it was a reminder to me that you can forge new rituals, you can forge new community and new bonds with people that you didn't even know that you would. And so
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying about wanting to reach for the phone, it resonates. And I love how you frame, do that still, that ritual is still in your body, but be able to pick up something new and do something different as an opportunity to yourself, because that's what you deserve. You deserve all the happiness in the world.
I love that story. Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah, I'm thinking like you even like yeah. Next time that happens, maybe I'll just like put my mama's number in and call her and say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Granny. I also am thinking about the new album that just dropped. What do you think about it? You know what I mean? Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Do that. And after you do it, will you text me and let me know that you did it and how did it feel?
Yeah, well, we'll
How will
do.
that?
We'll do.
So this might be in the same scheme of things, but my next question for you is, have you developed a grief mantra for yourself? And if you have, will you share it with us as we are all searching to find our own?
Ooh. Okay, so I haven't developed a grief mantra, so to speak, myself. This is something that I actually got from that book by Francis Weller. Francis Weller in the book wrote, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but to be a good host to what your grief, essentially, to be a good host to your grief. The way that I have expounded upon that is like, think about what it means to invite someone into your home in the Black South, in the Black anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to invite someone into your home, and what do people do when they come to your house? They bring you something typically, especially if it's your first time. You know, we don't show up nowhere empty handed.
Right.
They bring you something. Grief is no different. If I invite grief in, I'm a good host to that grief. Grief is gonna give me something back. That's just the
Mm-hmm.
nature of it. If we actually invite it in and we spend time with it and we sit in it, grief will like it. It has completely changed how I move throughout the world, and mostly for the better. Mostly for the better. I would give up any skills that I have to have another conversation with my grandmother. Like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like grief is the last gift that she gave me before she left, and I am so grateful for it. And I wouldn't have been able to arrive to where I am now and kind of where I'm still headed, were I not a good host to my grief. And so yeah, I would just say like, don't run from it because grief will chase you down. But
Won't it?
sit with it,
With a hatchet.
open the door. Look, throw the door open, pull up a seat, get some spades
Oh,
card, do
Lord.
what you got to do, but be a good host to your grief because it will give you something in return. That's my mantra, so to speak. Yeah.
Mm. Look, when you just rock side to side, like when something just, you know, that's that's what this word has done. It's just like let it settle, just like a shawl around your shoulder. Just yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So looking ahead, what changes would you like to see in how society addresses grief and community support, particularly in marginalized communities?
Mm, mm. Ooh. I would really, really, I think this is a low stakes thing. I would really appreciate and yeah, I would appreciate it if we would just have more conversations like this. And I know sometimes that can be uh, no, that there's a level of intention that you enter this conversation with, the questions that you answered, the way that you approached it, like that is very meaningful to me. And I talk about grief a lot. It's something I think about a lot and that sort of thing. And so it was an easy yes for me. It was a no brainer. I wanted to come and be in this space with you. I think about how many people don't get this opportunity to talk about what they're holding, and just being able to just talk about it. Like I mentioned, like I don't shy away from this conversation at all. Like I will talk to people about their grief and what they're holding anywhere, just to see where it lands and how it lands. And so I think for us, um, folks in marginalized communities, we don't even get a lot of time to just like talk about what we're holding. We know we're going through a lot. We know that like we're bereft of resources. We don't have a lot of time with it, that sort of thing. But they're like, if you when you get that time, be intentional about it. Don't just kind of like dilly dally through your conversations. Like really like sit with some real stuff sometimes. And it doesn't have to be heavy, but just open a door to the conversations about grief. I would just love that. Just more conversations like this. So my sincere gratitude for you inviting me on the show. And I hope that people will hear this and feel compelled to just talk to their homies about what they're holding genuinely.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. And it was a no-brainer, Trey. As I'm building the show and thinking, who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to give? Who do I want to share platform with? And platform is just a funny way of saying, who do I want to sit across the table and record with to share a message that needs to be illuminated. And you crossed my mind. And that's why when I reached out, I was like, I'm just trying to be obedient. I don't know if you want to do this or not, but I'm just trying to be obedient. So I appreciate you saying yes to this, because this has filled me. And I know as it resonates with me, it's going to resonate with other people. It's going to offer that collective healing that we're all searching for. Before I let you
Mm-hmm.
go, I have some rapid fire questions.
I'm nervous.
Don't be. These are meant to be light and thought provoking, but at the same time, you just go with what first thing that pops into your head. So we're gonna have some fun with it. You recently became a homeowner. Congratulations on that. Number
Yes.
one, major key.
Thank you.
What are the top three essentials in creating a sanctuary space?
Oh my gosh. Plants, music, and lighting. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer. Yeah. And you got a party. Just straight up. You got an atmosphere, you got a party.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you've always been a curator of good vibes and good music. A quick aside, do you remember those playlists that you used to put together for homecoming?
I still
Like
got some of those
do you
playlists.
still do that? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So homecoming, all right, again, we went to UNC Chapel Hill. You could always expect maybe like a week or two leading up to homecoming. Here comes Trey with 12 to 16 jams. And it was always on brand. Like it was we were waiting for it to drop. Like I was like, I'm not even figuring out the outfits yet. Like I need the music. Right? So I appreciate you for coming up with those. As your playlists
Yeah.
have evolved, I want to know what's your number one griefy jam that occupies your
Oh.
playlist right now.
Oh my goodness. A singular. Oh goodness. I made two grief playlists. I was literally riding to the beach. I was like, my grandmother had passed. I think it was like the weekend we were actually gonna come back home to go to the funeral. I was like, I need to ride to the beach and put my feet in the sand right quick. I just need to
Yeah,
release some things.
that's
I'm
right.
making a playlist on the fly. Do not advise while you drive. I don't advise. I'm making a
10 out
playlist,
of 10. Don't
and
recommend.
I'm literally tears are literally streaming down my face as I'm riding to the beach, and I'm like, these songs are just coming to my head. I was like, okay, Granny, you in the car with me? We just gonna vibe. I don't know if I could name a singular song, but there are a bunch of them from that playlist. Lisa Sawyer by Leon Bridges reminds me of my grandmother a lot. It's a very like mid-tempo song. There's like this hum kind of bass line, and it's beautiful. And that reminds me of my grandmother. There's this other song called oh man, I hate that I can't think of the name of it, nor the person who sings it. It is beautiful, and it's about sunshine. I'm gonna have to put this in the comments of the post or something
Yes.
because I want people to hear this.
Yes, and with your permission, I will add it to the Grieve and Heal playlist. So
Okay.
as a call out to episode 4, where we talked about music is medicine with Jeff Smith, who also is a UNC alum and a DJ of sorts like you. We
Okay.
came up with a griefy playlist to
Ah, I
help
love
grieve
it.
and heal. So with your permission, I will add those 2 songs to that,
Yeah.
and I want to know.
Oh,
Oh, you got it.
I got it. It's Luke James, "Shine On." I think Samoa is
Mm,
featured on the track, and Samoa's from North Carolina.
okay.
That track there, and it's a baby on the end talking about the sunlight and something. Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, "Shine On" by Luke James and Samoa.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We're going to add it. All right. This next one, because I know the South got something to say, right?
Period.
And you, rural North Carolina is like runs deep in your soul and mine too. And I think in a
Hmm.
cool way to honor our grandmothers, I'm going to kick you some South colloquialisms. And I want you to finish the statement. And I think that will
Oh goodness.
confirm for us that we all grew up with some sort of this.
No
Um,
pressure.
no pressure, but a great way to honor the ancestors. All right. First one. God willing and the creek don't.
Rise.
Yes. What you know,
Oh goodness.
that's
Who
a
knew
hard
this
one.
one?
But this is as a greeting. An uncle might come in and say, "What you know?"
Oh, okay. What you know good?
Yes. Now, quick, do you know how to answer that? Because I've never known how to answer what you know good. Is it good? Like, what do you say to that?
Oh my goodness. So like I've heard people answer that like many different ways. Here's another Southern phrase.
Okay.
What you know good, and usually people will flow right into how are you doing something that, and I've heard people say fair to middling, and I'm like, what
Okay.
are people saying?
I don't
What is
know.
that? Like folks in the rural South, like yeah, doing fair to middling. Evidently, it's like people who grew up on farms, like older black folks will say this, and it's
Hmm.
evidently a way to like judge when the like tobacco is done. Like they'll hang it up, and if
Right.
it's like mid grade, they'll say fair to middling. Like I'm just doing okay. So that's another phrase that
Mm.
I've learned. But yeah, fair to middling.
Oh. Okay. If someone says, "All right, now you being too big for your,"
Now, breeches is the first thing that came to my mind.
that's it.
Is that what? Okay.
Ding, ding, ding. 3 for 3. If there are people that are just best friends, your grandma, my grandma might say they are thick as.
Ooh. Oh, thick as thieves.
Yes. I need one of those like ding ding like.
I'm like, I better get 100% on these. You know how hard I ride for the South.
Okay, just a couple more. After eating a good meal, belly is full. You might be full as a.
A tick.
Yes. Like, why is that a thing? Why do we know how full a
I
tick is? And
I
ticks are
don't know.
tiny. I grew up thinking ticks were huge, but they're like, you can barely even. Okay,
Uh-huh. Some things you don't even question. You just go with it. You just go with
right.
it.
Last two. After a long day of work, you might say, "I'm tired as."
Now this one, I don't know if I know this one. Kelly, I think you might have got me on this one.
After a long day of work, I'm tired as all get out.
Oh my gosh.
Don't make no sense. Don't make no sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm
And I
tired as all
literally
get
say
out.
that. Tired as all get out. And I literally say that.
All right, we got to give you a win for the last one. I know you know this. Running around like a chicken.
With his head cut off.
I give you 100%. You got a 93. That's
Yeah, I appreciate you. Look, that's the old rubric. They don't even use that no more. They on the 10-point scale or something. I don't know.
right.
Listen, far
What
be it from
you
me to judge.
passed. You passed. Okay. What's a common misconception about grief that you work to demystify?
mm, Common misconception about grief that I work to demystify. I think a lot of people think of grief as like this like heavy, and it is dark, kind of like we think of grief as like this like bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that grief, despite the loss and that sort of thing, like for me, grief and love are sisters. My grief keeps my grandmother here with me in my heart. I think that that is a net positive, if there could
Yeah.
be one. Grief is like this thing that like yeah, if you think of love, you think of grief. It is what keeps my people here with me. I like go out in nature and stuff like that, and I know my folks are with me. When I'm thinking about my grandmother and granddad, and I see like two sparrows floating. I'm like, that's not a coincidence. I'm
Yeah.
like, that is grief. Yeah. So I think that grief doesn't have to be this dark, heavy thing. Grief can be beautiful when we when we come into right relationship with it. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that like I think people shy away from the conversation oftentimes because they think that it's like this like heavy thing, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. What has grief taken from you? And then I also want to know
Hmm.
what has grief given you? Those are the last two questions.
Hmm. Grief has taken from me as I'm getting older. There are conversations that I wish that I could have had with my grandparents that I just like wasn't thinking about when I was younger, in my 20s and my teens. It's like I have had life experiences now, and I'm privy to things that like I want to know what they thought when they were in my position. I don't have the opportunity to do that anymore. But I am fortunate enough. So that's what grief has taken from me.
Mm-hmm.
I am fortunate enough. I'm a curious person. My granddad was a family like anthropologist of sorts. He always had a camcorder in his hand. And so I am privy to like tapes on top of tapes on top of tapes on top of tapes. He recorded everything. Stuff from I was looking through one the other day. I had to look. You know how hard it is to find a VHS tape player now? They don't exist.
Still don't know how to
Like they
find
don't
one.
exist.
Send me the
They're like a
link.
vintage, yeah. So I went and bought one, and there was a video of my grandparents walking along the lake. I'm from a tiny little area. There's a big lake down there, and they walking like my grandma's joking, like you should come and see our beaches, and I'm just like so tickled by some of the things. They had a Head Start that my grandmother threw a birthday party for me at Head Start, and I'm seeing like my old friends who like I'm like wow, I wonder where they are, that sort of thing. And so I wouldn't have taken the time to really sift through these things and kind of find these memories and like really. So my grandparents left stories here. I can kind of maybe get the answers to what I've lost through what
Mm-hmm.
I've gained. If I just spend the time and go, sift through the stuff. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And so that's one of the reasons why I like create content. I'm just like doing what my granddaddy did. I want to be able to leave some stories here for my
Yeah.
nieces and for my, you know what I'm saying? And so yeah, I think that's what grief has given to me. Like, there's a story here, and I'm like, what is it? And I just got to do the work of finding out what it was because they left some gems here for us for sure.
Mm. I love it. And I love you. Thank you
Yeah, love
for
you too.
being
Thank you.
here and for sharing your story with us. It is amazing. So, as I always say, take what you need, leave what you don't, share with someone who needs it the most. Trey has dropped some tremendous gems on us this afternoon. I'm so thankful for you. And I now want to give you the space to tell us how can people reach out to you? What are you working on? In anything that you want to leave the listeners and the viewers with, please. The time is yours.
Oh, what am I working on right now? One of the things that consumes my thoughts right now that like I guess kind of emanated from my experience with loss over COVID and my grandparents and that sort of thing is like I firmly believe that we are all we have. Like, we have power when we come together with our communities, with our friends, with our families, and we can like flatten the hierarchies and like show up for each other, and like everybody just chip in, do their part, that sort of thing. So I have been working on a podcast with my homie Kyla on just like the power of friendship and what that can do for you and how that can hold you up and bolster you in the midst of everything. And so I don't know when it'll be out and that sort of thing. We've just been writing, and
Yeah.
it's cool to work on because it literally just it's like cool to remember like what is possible, and that sort of thing. We often just kind of move, and we run, and we forget that like we have power and we've survived something. We've been through some things and we like came out on the other side, and it's cool to like write about that and like be able to go back and put my finger on it. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm working on. And then you can find me intermittently on Instagram at what's WHATS 1 as the number more pathos, POTHOS, what's one more pathos. So yeah, and I also have a website under the same name, what's one more pathos.com.
Well, we will share it all in the show notes and tag you on everything. And I can't wait to share the podcast. So hurry up, get her done, so we get that out.
In
The world
time.
needs it.
Kelli, thank you.
You so much for this conversation. Y'all be well. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me, Kelli Holloway, inside of today's episode. For a deeper dive, remember you can watch this episode on YouTube and listen on your favorite audio streaming platform. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. For more information about Grief in the Raw podcast and to connect with me, my special guest, and the Grief in the Raw community forum, visit kellyandco.com. All links are in this episode's description. Tremendous thanks to the producer of Grief in the Raw, Miss Bethany Anderson, and major shout out to Jeffrey Smith, who curated the soundtrack for the pod.